Good morning, everybody. Here. Oh, hello. Okay, there we go. Good morning, everybody. I'm David McGuire. I will be your moderator for this morning. Reporting live here from Indianapolis, Indiana, where it's snowing a little bit when I was outside. So excited about that. Your moderator for this morning. Reporting live here from Indianapolis, Indiana, where it's snowing a little bit when I was outside. So excited about that. Your moderator for this morning. Reporting live here from Indianapolis. Yeah, we have some little background going if you have a tab open. There we go. All right. So again, David McGuire here. Little background going if you have a tab open. Awesome. There we go. So I think we have a little background noise. That's okay. Sometimes when you share multiple tabs, it happens. But yeah, I'm David McGuire. I'll be your moderator for this roundtable. I'm excited reporting here from Indianapolis, Indiana, where, as I mentioned, it's a little cold, a little snow coming down, but all is well. We're good. So this morning, I have three phenomenal individuals that's going to discuss with me this evening in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King, keeping the dream alive together. And so before we get started, I did want to share that you can view other sessions this afternoon if you visit the Keep Indiana Learning YouTube page. Make sure that when you're sharing, whether that's YouTube or Facebook or social media, wherever you are, make sure you use the hashtag #DreamWithUs. You use that hashtag and you can engage with all the other participants, moderators, and those that are engaging in the summit. And so, again, excited to be here. I'm honored to share this roundtable and share this space. And again, just going to jump right in. So before I get started, I wanted to share one of my favorite Dr. Martin Luther King quotes. And it's a quote that you don't really hear too often, but it goes, "We may have all come on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now." And I think in the spirit of our country and whether your workplace, that we all come from different walks of life and different backgrounds, but we all landed in the same boat. And I think if we keep that mindset that regardless of where we come from and our background and different, ethnicities and things like that, that we're all in this together. And so when we think about this idea of dream with us, I also want to say we're all dreaming together. And so again, that's one of my favorite quotes. And so I'm going to kick it off to our panel, who will share a little bit about themselves. And you may also hear them share a Dr. King quote as well. But again, some of them had sessions this morning and we'll have other sessions this afternoon. But I'll yield the floor. So we'll start at my top left with Kit Malone. So go ahead and jump off mute and share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, David. My name is Kit Malone. I use she, hers pronouns, and I am an advocacy strategist at the ACLU of Indiana. I work on all of our issue campaigns, which working at the ACLU sometimes feels like all of the issues. But in particular, I also lead our LGBTQ rights project and our trans education and advocacy program, which is an all fronts program to educate the Indiana population about the needs of trans people and to specifically prepare trans leadership and to support them in their communities. We have over 40 trans advocates around the state, particularly focusing in rural areas where they can speak to their communities and educate them, because that's the work that needs to be done for equality. I want to share an MLK quote because it's a quote that I come back to on this day every year, and it's something that grounds me and centers me in the work that I do and where my ethics lie, and reminds me of how important it is. And that is the famous, "I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate who prefers a negative peace, the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice." And to me, always making sure that I am not trading comfort, my own comfort, in exchange for justice, is something that informs every bit of my work and is the entire reason that I am here.
Thank you, Kit. Thank you for sharing. And if I remember, I heard in our pre-meeting before the show, you're also pulling double duties. You're also working today. I think you said in addition to being on this session. So thank you for taking some time away from work and share with us. And thank you again for that quote. Again, that's one I hadn't heard either. I'll make sure I add that to my Rolodex as well. Next up, we have Dr. Sutton. So if you could take yourself on mute and share a little bit about yourself as well.
Hello there. And yes, thanks for allowing me to be here today. I am an assistant superintendent with South Bend Community School Corporation, and I oversee equity, diversity, and inclusion strategic efforts, and including professional learning support for our staff, for our students, and work with the community. I also am an executive producer, or I produce and direct the Thought Leadership Conference that brings together business, education, and community leaders to one place to build a connected culture and focusing on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And that will be happening in May of this year in person in downtown Elkhart. So one of the things that I am critically that I think is critical today, and I think Dr. King really helps us to focus on that. And in this quote, I used it earlier, and it is not possible to be in favor of justice for some people and not in favor of justice for all people. And that is a very poignant remark for me, especially as an interculturalist. I believe in everyone having justice and having a place at the table. So thanks again, and happy to be here.
Likewise, thanks for coming. And my fellow K-12 educators, I thought I would share that too. In South Bend, and I'm definitely going to make sure I can try to attend that Dream Summit down in your Thought Leadership Summit in South Bend. Yeah, absolutely. Because also South Bend has a Krispy Kreme donuts that you can't find here in Indianapolis.
They do.
I'll make sure I take a trip for that.
The red light.
Absolutely. Last but not least, Dr. Stone, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Yes, good morning. Good morning from Texas. I'm Dr. Jeannie Stone, and I am a 33-year public school educator, and I am just finishing up a superintendency in Richardson ISD, which is a suburb of Dallas, although most of the district is in Richardson ISD. We are in Dallas proper. We have the district that I just served with had 38,000 students, and over the course of my time there, I realized the necessity and the importance of becoming passionate about the work of equity and seeing all students. When I took over as superintendent in 2017, we had a vision statement that all students will learn, grow, and succeed. And I quickly was able to see that we were not really living out the vision of those words. They were words on a banner, but we were not necessarily doing the work to ensure that someday that they would actually have the meaning that they needed to have, where all would mean all. And so over the course of my time in Richardson, we were able to do a lot of work to intentionally move those words to action. And one of my favorite Martin Luther King quotes is, "Our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about things that matter." And the reason why I chose that one is because in today, so many people are trying to silence this work, to call it something that it isn't, to name it something and make it wrong. And so I've just ended up my role as superintendent to move on to take my passion and to continue to make a difference in different arenas such as this, to continue to talk about the need to make sure that in public education, all has to mean all.
Thank you. So if you heard those introductions, you can always see I have a powerful group of individuals here with me, and we're gonna dive right in. And so, Dr. Stone, the spirit of kind of what you talked about your vision statement that you had, and if I could offer, so I'm a principal at a charter school here in Indianapolis, a K-6 charter school, and our vision is educating and empowering all scholars to set them on the path to college to live a life they desire and deserve. And we really harp on that last piece, a life that they desire and deserve. And so when I think about the spirit of our roundtable and this summit, we're talking about dreaming together for a better future, right? So in our work, we're all working towards helping folks have better opportunities in life and help make our society, a better future. So Dr. Stone, I'll start with you. When you think about our vision for today, dreaming together for a better future, talk about how your work and your superintendency not only helped the students in your school community, dream together for a better future, but also just everybody within it. So teachers and parents and the overall community. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, one of the things you need to know about my school district is that we are a district that is predominantly students of color. We have 29% of our district of 38,000 students is white. And yet our data reveals that students, the gap that you might, everyone knows about, it's the achievement gap that shows that white students are going to be outperforming students of color by sometimes 30 and 40 percentage points. And yet that is just accepted as if that's the way it's going to be. And so the work that I did when I was in Richardson ISD and will continue to do across in terms of not only Texas education, but our national education system is to put a spotlight on that, to get people to really own that. To see that that data is more than just percentages and numbers, but those are individual lives of students. And how can we accept gaps like that without seeing what it is in our systems what the things that are broken in our system that have to be repaired if we're ever going to get different outcomes. And so, I've looked at vision statements across the country, and so many times that word all is used, but people aren't owning it in terms of making sure that all means all. And so today, in the spirit of dreaming and looking to see what we all have to be doing to honor the work of courageous people who spoke out about these kinds of disparities, like Martin Luther King, the thing that we have to do is each one of us who truly is an educator and believes if we truly are going to say the word all, and we have to put it into our actions and to build systems that are going to get different outcomes for all students.
Agreed. I always tell folks, in that all, we always capitalize each letter of the all, because the capitalization, making it big, represents all, right? Regardless. And so thank you for that. So Dr. Sutton, thinking about you, you work in South Bend, dreaming together for a better future. Mm-hmm. Talk about how your work ties into that in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King today.
Well, I just want to piggyback on something that Dr. Stone just stated, and that talks about systems. So my dream, and I should say the dream of dreaming together, has to start with leading with equity. And how do we do that? We have to, number one, I think in a school system, the headship, the board has to make that a priority, because that's when you really start to line all your systems. And so one of the things that we've been doing is talking about defining what the equity challenges are, because oftentimes people have their own idea. It's such a large chasm. So you really need to start defining what equity challenges we are going to address. And then we need to continue with this is cyclical process with the why and understanding the demographics and the data. What's the community? What are the demographics in the community? What are the what's the economic situation in the community? There are multiple reasons why we have to define that challenge of equity. And then we need to talk about that how. How do you begin to organize for equity when you have so many different challenges before you? And every community is uniquely different. One of the ways that we in our district began to organize for equity, we had to make sure we hired the right people. Our superintendent, Dr. Cummings, has been a champion, and as an assistant superintendent, we have made sure that this is on everybody's table, not just one person. And oftentimes we have this conversation about you need to take action, but a lot of times we have to have that system of accountability. So hiring the right people, getting something, we're in the middle of a consent decree, making sure that's on track, and seeking the dollars that are necessary. We have sought and received over $53 million in federal grants. And staying focused and implementing the strategic plans, and then definitely raising the expectations. And the last thing that I just want to say about this is when we talk about equity, every department has to have a structure for equity, and looking at equity through finance and public education by the numbers. And again, every community has a unique set of challenges. So it becomes important to define the what, the why, and how you're going to how we're going to achieve equity. That to me brings together the dream of living to or creating a better future for equity.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. Finally, on this topic, Kit, so talk about your work with the ACLU about, dreaming together for a better tomorrow. So if you could talk a little bit about the work you're doing in that, in the spirit of Dr. King.
Oh, just that. Okay. We are.
Well, you can go into more. Listen, you can go into more. Let the words move you.
I am a former teacher, so if you tempt me with the ability to talk for a long time, I will often take that bait. But at the ACLU of Indiana, we're devoted to extending the promises of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to all people, and to also work for an expansive understanding of what individual rights and what justice means. So we work the entire waterfront of civil rights issues, including mass incarceration, censorship and free speech, the right to vote, the rights of LGBTQ people and other minority groups who are being pushed out of public spaces. So that is it's no small task, but of course that's all really entangled deeply in Martin Luther King's vision. The idea of creating an equitable society where people can be who they are. And they're not going to be defined by simply the group that they have been painted by the majority culture to be hated as. And I think that when we, for me, as a former school teacher, as someone who had to really exit the profession because I was a trans person, that's deeply personal. That's deeply personal work. Teaching was in many ways my favorite thing that I'd ever done. And I love the lessons that I've carried out of that into the work that I do now. In many ways, I am a teacher, only these days I tend to teach older lawmakers about how to be nice to trans people, which is fun. But also I think that that work is so relevant to schools today in Indiana. When we look at, and Dr. Stone reference from her vantage point in Texas, which I know is undergoing the same issue, where we have sort of uprisings and school board meetings, often being led by groups from outside the community, coming in to harass the really dedicated civil servants who serve on those school boards, and to send the message to their communities that something is wrong in their schools. And the message is always very vague. And when we look back at history, when these things have happened, the messages have always been very similar. Somebody is teaching your children something that you don't want them to know about. Someone is teaching your children something troubling that isn't in line with your values. And of course, that's an inherently majoritarian stance. It is something that says that the values of the minority members of the community don't matter in the face of the values of the majority members of the community. It is also a very, and again, I say this as a teacher, a very layperson's idea of how education works. This idea that education is simply reading facts out loud in front of a class like you might from an encyclopedia and not taking positions. We as teachers and really those of us who have had good educational experiences know that our favorite times were teachers in classroom environments that challenged us to reflect, that may have provoked emotional responses. In Indiana, we have legislation moving that would really prevent lesson plans that provoked emotional responses in children to be taught, that would chill teachers out of offering opportunities for children to place the issues of the day and the issues that come up in their history classes and their literature classes and in their social studies classes, into context, and to reflect on how other people might feel and do that very important critical thinking and empathy building that a real education is also all about. And we have to ask ourselves what we want schools to be for. What do we want our youth to come out? Are we simply there to give them the story of a handful of facts about our history and then move on? Or are we there to build citizens who are capable of engaging and building a better world? And I don't think we can do that if we're sanitizing our curriculum.
I knew this was going to be good. I knew it. We were starting off really good. And so I want to thank those that are tuning in. We see your comments. And again, if you're tuning in, make sure you use the hashtag Dream With Us. And you can, if you like, pose questions for the panelists. And we have a really good question from Jade, or from Raven Jade. And it says, I'd like to hear how the panelists suggest educators approach administrations that are seemingly willing to ignore the data / the gaps. So again, we have a great question from Jade. If you have a question that you want to pose to the panelists, feel free to drop it in there. So I'll turn over to the panelists to answer whoever wants to jump in. Jade's question.
Well, I would like to start and ask a different question, or just frame it a little differently. Because sometimes if you're in, I'm assuming this may be a teacher who's asking this question, and maybe not. But first, of course, having a conversation with your upline and seeing what are some of the things that you can do, and looking at the data. But I think thinking back as let's say a classroom teacher, what can you do in your classroom to begin to address those actions and with your colleagues, even if you are not gaining the buy-in from others? I think you have a lot of power to enact change. And I think that's really the spirit of what Dr. King said. It starts with you. And everybody's not going to, not all will be on the bandwagon with you. So what is it that you can personally do to make those changes? You can look at the data, you can work with your colleagues and begin to make those personal changes directly to your students. That's if they are unwilling to hear. But first, of course, always follow the chain of command, but never underestimate your power.
Yes, I'll add on to that. Because I was a superintendent, I was so equity focused, and because I really built a culture where I was empowering teachers and leaders to take part. I saw so much change over the course of a number of years, because people really truly would come, and I would ask them, why did you feel like that you could take that part of the system in which you owed and truly make a difference and take the action and be bold? And they would say time and time again to me, because you gave me permission and you empowered me to do that. So I hear so strongly the voice of what, maybe this is a teacher or maybe it's a principal who's asking, but what if you don't have that? Because as I speak across the state at different districts, I get that question asked time and time again. I think so much of it does have to do with what Dr. Sutton did say about how individually we each have our own purpose, right? And we have our purpose, and whatever part of the system, be it a classroom, be it a school, be it a department, being over gifted and talented, being over student services where you're owning the discipline data and you see the disproportionate data that is coming out, own that part of the system and do your part. I believe that if every educator did their part and that they moved forward boldly with purpose, that's what we need in our system. There's so much fear that has been created, especially in the last year, to say that anything that we are doing in the name of trying to achieve different outcomes for students of color is wrong. that fear is now oppressing people to say, well, maybe I can't do that anymore. And I say, move forward like never before. You know, our purpose was in place before anybody had an opinion about it. And so to be able to do that, and so that's part of what we have to do in forums like this, is to challenge educators to be resistant to those forces that are intentionally following a playbook. In Texas, there is a well-defined playbook to stop this work. And we have to be as persistent and strong, steadfast in our purpose that all will mean all, because if we're not, and we fall back into just being, silent, we're going to continue to get the same outcomes that we've always gotten, which are not serving our students if we don't take action to move beyond words into passing policies. In Richardson ISD, we passed a board policy that said that it is a part of my job as superintendent and every educator's job in that district to work to end discrimination, to look at the data and to see where there is disproportionate data, and then take action to see what is broken in the system that needs to be rebuilt to get different outcomes for students. And despite all of the voice and the noise that is out there right now, trying to call it wrong and shut it down, we have to remain steadfast in that purpose. Again, my purpose was in place before anybody had an opinion about it and wanted to call it something, and say it was wrong. It's truly about outcomes for all students and questioning, does all mean all in my classroom, my part of the system that I'm responsible for? Does all mean all in my part of the system if I'm a principal? Does all mean all if I'm over gifted and talented service or advanced placement and extracurricular participation? Does all mean all? And if it doesn't, then own it and start to do the work.
And I'm just going to be real short because I don't currently work in a school. So I think Dr. Sutton and Dr. Stone really, really are the voices here. But I'm just going to leave us with 3 words because I'm loath to tell teachers who are currently undergoing so much what they need to do. But what I will say is 3 words: organize, organize, organize.
I love it. And if I could just offer just a quick thought about, Raven's question. I think data in schools has become such a dirty word. And I believe it's because people look at the data and they always take the negative connotation of data and saying what the teacher or the school isn't doing, instead of saying this data is help putting us on a roadmap, right? It's like shooting at a target in the dark. The data is the light that helps you see the target that you're aiming at better. And I think, to Raven's point, what do you do as a teacher? I agree with Dr. Sutton. The power lies within you as the teacher, right? But I will say on the end of the administrator, if you're not creating a space to support your teachers in understanding their data, unpacking their data, making the data work for them and to help align their instruction and their teaching, then I would say shame on you, honestly, right? Because I think it is your job and your obligation to give teachers those toolkits. I don't expect the teacher 22 years old coming in to know how to do that, but I do expect the school to coach and train and support that teacher in identifying that data. And so I believe it is the responsibility of the principal and of the network in the district to support and create that space. And then with that, then it's the teacher's turn to take that data and own it themselves. So that's just all I want to offer. And let's not make data such a dirty word, a negative word. So I do want to circle back because I think, Kit, you brought up a very interesting conversation, especially in the spirit of what we're talking about. When you talked about the curriculum piece and what's being taught in school, what's not being taught in school, or what folks want taken out, certain truths and things like that. I'd be interested to hear from Dr. Sutton and Dr. Stone, and then Kit, you can always, come back in just about that as well. This idea of what's happening with schools when it comes to this attack on curriculum, the attack on school board. I mean, honestly, the attack on the profession. When we think about, Dr. Martin Luther King, how can we dream of a better future, when we're stripping away certain things that are going to help our students be better? And so just in your locale, your space, in your expertise, what's your thoughts on kind of what Kit brought up in regards to that? And Dr. Sutton, I'll start with you if you don't mind.
So just frame that for me again. So just clarify that. Yeah. Would you please repeat that question?
Yeah. So Kit mentioned, she talked about we'll just speak on the curriculum piece, right?
Okay.
The bills and legislation, just this argument around certain things that should or should not be taught in schools for students. What's your thoughts around that and things like that?
Well, again, the critical piece is for the district and the head to be very clear about their mission and their vision. That is what sets the tone. And once you are clear that, for example, in our district, we have 4 priorities. One of them is equity, diversity, and social justice. And our focus on that is very clear, a very clear message. It's part of our system and it's a part of our accountabilities. And therefore, we have the space and the freedom to address and to move forward on those particular concepts and issues. And therefore, everything else, while it does try to infiltrate, our focus is very clear. And that outside noise has to somewhat move away. And so in a political space and in a community, everybody's coming to the school board and everybody's trying to work their way around. But once you have grounded in what it is and what your purpose is, then I think that gives way to what whether that's curriculum or whatever the matter is, the professional development, they're even coming after the professional development, but the curriculum is set by our school board. They set as a priority and we're able to move forward. And so really that is, I've been in this work a while. And once you have the system set and the board is on board, so to speak, you're in good shape. And so that is my thought about it. You must have that level of buy-in. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Dr. Stone, before I go to you, I want to ask Dr. Sutton just a follow-up. You mentioned those priorities that your district has. How important is it for the principals, the teachers, the parents, the community members to understand the priorities of those districts? So when things come up like curriculum and professional development, they understand the rhyme and reason of why you're doing. How important are those priorities?
It is critically important because then that's where you have the momentum to move forward. And even when those outside voices, as Kit said, a lot of the people are not even from the community who come in and suggest we shouldn't teach certain things. So it becomes critically important because, again, the schoolhouse, the business, and the community people are one. They're not separate entities. And so we must move together as one. And so we have to be out in the community and having those relationships with families and with students, and their voices are at the table. You create such a level of synergy once you bring all that together. That is the core of a strong community and school.
I love that. You said dreaming together, but also moving together. I love that. Dr. Stone, you want to share a little bit? I know you've had a little bit of experience with this, so kind of talk about your work.
Oh yeah, from just statewide Texas. Kit mentioned in Indiana potential for legislation to be passed. In Texas, that legislation has already been passed. So there were bills that legislation that went through very easily across to get signed by our governor that for the very first time limits what can be taught in our social studies classes, very specifically limits and wording such as that that there cannot be any type of race-related concepts that are taught, including any ideas that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex, or that someone is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive. some of the language about how if things are taught, that there must be an alternative perspective taught to that, which obviously those who were working in Austin to try to shut that legislation down, were questioning. So an alternative perspective to, slavery, an alternative perspective to the Holocaust, those kinds of things. But there's legislation in place intentionally, it's what it has done is it has created fear on the part of teachers about what they can and cannot teach. Those kinds of critical things that Kit, you talked about, that we as teachers, it is everything about good education is getting students to question and to look back. And history matters. It is critical. History matters. I was an English teacher, and a great line from George Orwell is, "He who controls the past controls the future." Right. And so and that is exactly what we are experiencing in Texas. So that is what is happening. So what we know is so important is for districts, as Dr. Sutton said, to be extremely not only supportive of their teachers, but very, very convicted about what they believe needs to happen in their school districts to fully teach students to be citizens of today, but using past to be able to shape them into who they need to be. And so much of what Dr. King promoted about the importance, history matters. And so we're going through that right now. Which was so important for me when I was in Richardson, to have that adopted equity policy in policy, something that was cover, if you will. And don't believe me, I used it all the time when there were challenges that would come forward about library books, about different things that were being taught, about cultural appreciation, and just about, we had a connecting cultures at our elementary. It was a curriculum that just was to expose students to an appreciation of different cultures unlike their own. And so much of it would get into areas of race that challenged parents. But we had an equity policy that said that those things had to be in place to fully educate our students. And so, I just challenge districts who don't have something like that to take it to the level of making it policy, if at all possible, because it does give cover for the things that need to be happening in the classrooms.
Kate, just go. I want to know, where do you think, Kit? Where do you think? Where does this attack come from? That's my short answer. My short question for you, and just elaborate. What do you think this attack came from, and the why?
I can't wait to address that. But the first thing that I want to say is I want to come back to something that Dr. Sutton said about the school board. And the importance, and like the way that she really laid out it's something that we talk a lot about, in Indiana. Our classroom censorship bills that are moving would create like a new committee to review the curriculum, which, to many of us who are very excited and invested in local government, we heard that and we thought, well, isn't that what the school board is? And the school board in Indiana, we are very lucky that those races are nonpartisan. The people who run for those positions are people who actually are invested in their schools and in wanting to, they're not there. It's not a stepping stone to another position. It is just really just people who live in the community who want to be part of the governance of the school. And like, I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think one of the saddest parts about the moment we're in is the way that is being devalued. And we even have efforts underway to convert Indiana's school board races to partisan races and to require, to inject even more politics into this overheated realm, which will solve nothing. And I think will really just continue the politicization of these schools. And where do this come from? I think, David, is... I think that we are living in an era where the political powers on either side have learned to benefit from keeping people at a boiling point at all times. keeping people under the impression that they have to show up now in the loudest possible way, and that it's life or death, and it's right now. And unfortunately, I think that some far right hate groups who fund a lot of the outreach on these have learned how to capitalize that, and learned how to get folks out. Here in Indiana, in the northern suburbs of Indy, around Hamilton County, and then some of the other counties, we even had some of these outside groups. One of them was based in Chicago on the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of hate groups, was producing, quote unquote information flyers to send to parents in Hamilton County to get them out to these school board meetings. Even when issues like race and gender and sexual orientation were not on the agenda in those meetings, simply to sort of create that impression that there is an issue in schools that need to be solved right now. I also think that we're in a time where parents, maybe for the first time, have seen the curriculum. As a teacher, I remember being frustrated by the involvement level of the parents. But parents do want to be involved, and they have a lot of challenges there. But having your kids in a Zoom room next to you, if you don't have the context, and you hear something out of context, maybe it becomes added to the list of things that you're worried about. And in a time in which you feel maybe you are under pressure all the time. And then all it takes is someone to say, well, your children are learning pornography in their classroom. You have to go to the school board meeting to stop them. And it becomes understandable why people might feel very emotional. Up in Carmel, Indiana, we had someone bring a gun to a school board meeting. These things are getting very heated, and there are outside interests who are taking that and exploiting that moment in order to pursue an agenda. That agenda generally is reducing things like voting rights, affecting our ability to make change, affecting our educational level about racial injustice, and also to prevent the inclusion of gender minorities like trans people in school curriculum. I noticed everywhere we saw testimony on the quote unquote CRT issue, we would also see transgender people being brought into that mix. And it's really part of a strategy nationwide that is to take the word CRT and link it to the idea of quote unquote liberalism gone mad. So every issue that someone who doesn't really understand very well, or every issue that seems new and scary, becomes part of the bulleted list under things that they now call CRT. And so that becomes a sort of marching phrase that people can get very mad about, very passionate about. The bills moving in Indiana in response don't even mention CRT. They don't even mention LGBTQ people. They don't even mention racial injustice. But what they do is send a clear message that if you teach a lesson that is controversial and a child feels a way about that lesson, whether that's sadness or anger, you may be in violation of the law. That chilling effect that is going to have is intended. It's intended. It is lawmakers who feel like they have found a sort of covert way to do this that isn't going to make them look like they're banning the discussion of racial history. In fact, you'll see them say in testimony, well, we're not telling you can't teach about racism. But of course, how can you teach about racism without teaching about the context, without teaching about teaching students to think about how they feel about it, and to think about how other people might feel about it. And that stuff becomes dangerous under this new regime.
Thank you. So we're bumping up on time, but before we go, I want you to do two things in this final thought segment. And the first is maybe put a finishing touch on anything that you said that you want to elaborate on or somebody else said. And then finally, we want to make sure that we leave folks with something. And so again, in the spirit of the work of Dr. King and what this day should symbolize, not only honoring his legacy and his life, but also putting action towards the things that he focused on and the idea of dreaming together for a better future. Leave folks with something that they can do, whether it's read something or share something or something you want to leave them with. So first, Dr. Sutton, we'll start with you. Put a bow on anything that you heard or said. and then leave the folks with something in the spirit of our conversation today.
Sure. Kit, my mind was going in so many different directions while you were speaking, and I know this is only a short period of time, but the question that comes to my mind, this is not new information. I'm just really surprised that everybody seems so surprised. What about when kids for years are sitting in the classroom listening to a very mono type of curriculum and they've never seen themselves? I can remember back in school, we didn't have, no one was protesting then when our curriculum only showed a very small segment of who people are. And so now all of a sudden we have this group of people saying, don't teach this. It's always been taught. Race has always been taught in schools, or the lack thereof. So this is not anything new. It's just gaining momentum and power, and things are changing and people want to put a stop to it. But it's always going to be with us. Our country has been, this is a founding piece of who the United States is all about. And so what I want to leave people with, however, is in the spirit of Dr. King, we must increase our capacity to be effective with everyone. We must stop all of these factions and come together and create synergy and move forward, to help students, to help their families, and to help their communities, and help your fellow person. So do what you can do. Sometimes you can't take care of the whole system, but you can take care of you. And Dr. King has the quote that talks about, if you can't fly, then walk. If you know the quote that he says, but you can do something, you can be great. Don't try to take the whole state, the whole world, but do what you can do. And that's what I want to leave with you today.
Thank you so much. Dr. Stone, you're next. Put a bone in anything, and then, leave the listeners with something.
Yeah, I just think, another quote that's a favorite of mine, Dr. King said is, the time is always right to do what is right. And we know what is right. We know what is right. We know what is right as educators. We know what is right as human beings. And, to so much of this last part of the conversation about this campaign to shut everything down, and to call the things that we're doing wrong, to name it, they know it's not right. We know it's not right. Don't be confused. Don't let them confuse, and don't let them confuse you to start to believe what you know is right. And then once if you truly embrace that, then you have to move forward with action. To control, like we talked about this whole time, the part of the system that is yours, be it working with one student that you see needs you, that you can make a difference. Maybe it's just one, maybe it's not 38,000, maybe it's just one, but don't ignore that one. Don't ignore the purpose that we have to have different outcomes for the future of this generation that needs us now more than ever, when society is trying to stop this work for them. We can't allow that to happen. Do your part wherever you are, and let that difference that you make fuel you to keep going and keep going. If we all do that in public education, we're going to make a difference, and we're going to get past this to the other side of what we're experiencing right now. We have to. All kids that we serve, they're counting on us to do that.
And Kid, I'll pitch it to you as well. Put a bone in anything, and then leave the listeners with something.
I don't have anything to add for teachers. Y'all are always doing the most, and you all are doing enough. I think that the thing that I would like to add is, for those who are non-teachers who are listening, choose service to your community, run for school board, choose to be involved in your school. Understand that, like, local government, right there at the grassroots in your immediate community is where you can affect the most people's lives. It's where the real work of our democracy is done. So get involved. If you feel a way, whether it's on one side or another, if you feel a way about the curriculum in your school, start with your teacher and have a discussion. Start with your administrators, have a real talk. Don't, immediately assume evil or malintent, but you can be the model for how to have complicated, difficult, and incredibly necessary conversations that our society absolutely needs. And I fear our society is getting worse at doing it and not better. So be that person who chooses to have a complicated conversation and to have grace and charity for the people who are working in this profession who, have unending asks piled upon them that only seem to be getting steeper. And think about what you want your community to look like and how you can help get it there. And think about it in your terms, not about what the mailer you got from me or from the other side thinks, but in your terms, what you want your community to look like. And that's all I have to say.
I would add on last thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not alone. Connect with Kit Malone. Connect with Dr. Tessa Sutton. Connect with Dr. Jeannie Stone. Connect with David McGuire. Connect with people that you know are aligned with your passion, and use that to help you to feel supported in the work.
Absolutely. And to close us out, Kit, Dr. Sutton, Dr. Stone, thank you. It was an honor and privilege to share the space with you. I learned a lot as an educator, and so I'm truly appreciative to be here. And in the spirit of connecting, make sure that you connect with Keep Indiana Learning, who is a sponsor and putting on this Dream Summit. We are not done. We are not done today. So there's a lot of things happening in the afternoon. So make sure that you tune in. The next session part starts at 12:30. And again, you can go to the Keep Indiana Learning YouTube page and view the other sessions. Make sure you use the hashtag Dream with us. And so again, I just want to close this with simply saying, this year we'll celebrate 59 years since Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, I Have a Dream. And so I just want to leave you with this. I say to you today, my friends, that in spite of the difficulties and frustrations, I still have a dream. Thank you all for sharing with us. Make sure you tune in and have a great morning.